Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We now commence our first panel discussion. The subject at hand is research and results for sustainable development, women empowerment, and economic growth. The discussion will be moderated by Dr. Rajat Kathuria, Director and Chief Executive at ICRIER. I request Dr. Kathuria and panel. Just a little about Dr. Kathuria, if you don't mind, Rajat. Dr. Kathuria has about 20 years of experience in teaching and 10 years of experience in economic policy. He worked with the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India and taught undergraduate economics at the University of Maryland and managerial economics and international trade at the International Management Institute in New Delhi. Can I request Dr. Kathuria to introduce the topic and the panelist? And Rajat, we have about 20 minutes for Q&A at the end of every session. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you, Binu, and it's absolute delight to be back. The morning session was excellent, as you noticed. And I'd just like to highlight, before introducing the panel and the topic, just like to highlight once again what we said in the morning. ICRIER does a lot of research, policy, and encourages discourse on topics such as this, but we are also 70% women. And I'm happy to work in an organization which has 70% women. So this topic is, as Binu said, this topic is research and results for sustainable development, women empowerment, and economic growth. What can government and policy makers do? There are four distinguished panelists. Kalpana Kochar, who will go first, is the Deputy Director of the IMF. Anu Madgavkar, the co-author of Power and Parity Report from McKinsey Global Institute. Anne Boring, postdoctoral researcher from Sciences Po Paris. And Anuradha Das Mathur, founding dean for Vedika Scholars Program for Women in India. So I'm not going to introduce each panelist because the bios are in the folder, in the booklet that you have in your packet, so that way we'll save time. We have about, half an hour for about a little over 30 minutes for each speaker to make opening remarks, then I'll ask them specific questions, and then we'll engage with the audience. I'll do the time management. But just a couple of words on the topic of research and results in this area. There's so much results that have been coming out in terms of how women can contribute to economic growth and also to firm performance. And the distinguished panelists will talk about that. But there are a few striking features. We live in a world today that is seeing, in parts of the world where you're seeing declining and aging populations, shrinking populations, especially in the West, in Europe, in Japan, in Korea, where there are shrinking populations and there are aging populations. And guess what? Women are being called upon to kind of resolve these problems by getting into the workforce and by helping improve firm performance. And this is not anything new in terms of research results. If one goes back to the 60s and 70s and recalls the myth, or as Paul Krugman called the Asia's miracle, economic growth, according to economists, can be caused by factor accumulation. And factor accumulation simply means adding more capital, adding more labor, and also improving productivity. And during the 60s and 70s in East Asia, a lot of the growth happened due to factor accumulation. And once you had exhausted the male supply into the labor force, it was the women who were called in once again to help to resurrect economic growth in East Asia. Women, again today, in shrinking populations, in aging populations, are being called upon to kind of get into the workforce and help alleviate the shortages of labor that are plaguing many of the European and East Asian countries. In South Asia and India, we're at a different stage in the transition. We have to get more women in the workforce, and enable them, improve their health outcomes, improve their education outcomes, because all of the research at the macro level, at the country level, and I'm sure we'll do much more of it, as the minister said, we'll do much more of it at the macro level, at the India level. We'll also do a lot of research at the local level. But a lot of those results point to unambiguous conclusions, and I'll just mention a couple of them. Getting more women in the workforce can help increase economic growth. If there is gender parity in the workforce, India's GDP will be higher by 27%. America's by 5%, Japan's by 9%, but India's by 20%. That's the result at the macro level. The second result is that greater number of women at the corporate level, at senior corporate positions, improves firm performance. Unambiguous results. It improves firm performance. And then we need, therefore, to enable women to join the workforce more by alleviating some of the constraints in terms of health, home, and of course, education outcome. We'll hear all of this from the panel. But, once we know this, what do we do in terms of policy? And that's what, as I said, ICRIER does. That's what ICRIER's bread and butter is. Really, we try and provide, evidence basis to improve the quality of decision-making at the level of the country, at the level of the state, at the level of local government. And I'm hoping that the results of not only what we discuss here and we discuss in the future, and there's huge, as I said, a host of economic research that is pointing to the fact that we need to get more women in the workforce, at senior positions, at entry levels. Now we have to translate that into action. And as Dr. Ahluwalia in the morning has said, ICRIER will encourage that discourse and enable that to happen, hopefully in the short term, not in the long term. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming back so quickly. And I will now turn to my panelists without taking too much time. Kalpana goes first. She's the Deputy Director, as I said, of the IMF. Thank you, Kalpana.
Thanks, Rajat. Possible to get my presentation up on the screen? As that's happening, that's not the first slide. Can you go back? Do you want me to do it here? Oh, this is going backwards. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. So, first of all, the thing that struck me actually, getting up to do this, is that it's curious that someone from the IMF is being asked to talk on this subject and talk on it first. This is the new IMF. But apart from that, it's because, why are we involved in this? And I think it's because there has been, I think, a pretty profound realization that that gender issues, or whatever you want, empowering women for economic growth, as I've entitled this speech, is actually a macro-critical issue. And that's kind of the lens that we use at the IMF to see whether we should get involved in an issue. What do I mean by macro-critical? I mean, it has major macroeconomic implications in terms of growth, both today and in the future, and also on the sustainability of growth. And in our work, I will confess at the start that we have, because we are a macroeconomic institution, because our expertise is on macroeconomics and macroeconomic policy, we have focused on issues related to the participation of women in economic activities, the barriers to their participation, the gains from their participation, and the public policy levers that could be used to encourage women's participation. This does not mean that we don't think that other issues are important, other policy interventions are important. It's basically to remain true to our expertise and mandate. So what are these macroeconomic gains? I'm actually going to go through the slide in a different order, starting from the last point over there, which is that the employment of women on an equal basis as men, improves the talent pool. And this is, I want you to keep this in mind. I'm going to elaborate on this in the next couple of minutes. But and you'll see why I'm making a little bit of a big deal on this, because it's also a source of a lot of questions and criticisms of this kind of work. unlike, I think, people in this room, there are still people out there for whom this message, I don't think, has caught on, that bringing more women into the labor force is an unambiguous good. Anyhow, so the first channel is that through which I believe women's participation contributes to growth and stability is that women's employment on an equal basis as men improves the talent pool. This is based on a very simple assumption. The assumption is that between men and women, talent is equally distributed, so tomorrow's, and then equal access to inputs, clearly higher productivity in female-owned companies. That's also something that Rajat